This is a conversation with Dargham. He's a media entrepreneur, founder and CEO of Step, the region's leading tech and entrepreneurship conference. He's also the founder of Step Feed, Yalla Feed, Arab Wines, and Spider Frogs, along with serving as the host of the Step Mate podcast. In this episode, we discuss entrepreneurship, launching a company in Dubai, and since I'm speaking to a person who has launched a startup to help other startups, I recognize this is a bit meta. Leadership, innovation, and monopolies, not the board game. This is no time. If you like what you see, do subscribe on YouTube. And I'm still getting used to saying this. But subscribe, whatever. I don't care. Follow on Spotify or rate 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. This project takes a lot of my time, money, and effort. So if you'd like to see it continue, do consider supporting me on Patreon. For other forms of love and support, you can follow this channel on Instagram or Twitter, or follow me personally. And now, it's no time. I came across this popular joke about entrepreneurship, which went something like this. As a startup CEO, I slept like a baby, which means that I woke up every 2 hours and I cried. So, I mean,
could happen some nights.
Does that happen to you?
Not necessarily, not at night, no, but yeah.
I mean, it's no secret the amount
I've cried before, but
no. It's no secret the amount of hard work, blood, sweat, and tears that go into it. Running a company will often involve a lot of failure, rejection, damages to your ego, social life, personal life, relationship with your family. Yet, founders who do it, they always swear by it because they get this sudden rush or a certain joy that makes all these obstacles worth it. So, my first question for you is, why do you do this?
Yeah, by the way, not to start on a negative note, but like the nightmares part of it, since you're talking about sleep, the nightmares part of it is, I think, like the most I've experienced. Because like your dreams, you cannot really control, right? So you can control your brain during the day, but at night can't control what you're gonna dream about. So yeah, I've had a lot of dreams and nightmares that has to do with work. That's for sure. And then yeah, you wake up, and then that impacts your day. So your dreams and like nightmares do impact your day and how they go. Uh, I've had a lot of also nightmares and dreams like before events, like because that's when everything is going down, and yeah, like the event was empty, or no one showed up, or something was like on fire. All sorts of weird stuff. But yeah, but I missed your question, so
But bringing it back to why you do it, what is the joy you get out of entrepreneurship?
yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I don't think I have like a complete answer for that. I don't know if I'll ever have like a full answer for it. um I think many days you feel great, and some days also you feel like shit. So it's a mix of the two. It's not that how some portray it as a like it's a great lifestyle or whatever. At the same time, yeah, it's not always like there are some also like joyful days that you get to feel good about what you're building. But I think to the most part, one is most of the time enjoying what I'm doing and what I'm working on. So and I get that with being an entrepreneur, and getting to build the things that I'd like to build. Um, and the second thing is also being able to continuously be thinking and about new things and new ways and new strategies for the business and for the products we're trying to build. So I think this is probably like the most joyful things of being an entrepreneur to me. Uh, but yeah, to sum it up, the most part is like loving what you do, and like enjoying what you're doing.
Do you have a specific memory where it all just made sense for you, whether you had this moment of clarity that this is what you want to do and all the obstacles they just faded away at that point?
I did actually. Yeah, very specific moment which I've spoken about. It's a bit of a long story, so we can to get into it. That's what we're here for, right?
We have time.
We're here for stories.
Yeah.
So basically, to take you a little bit back in time, I when I was in high school, and at that time you don't really know what you want to do. I mean, you have sites to play basketball, had a passion. I thought I was wanted to be a basketball player or whatever. And I used to play for a long time during my high school years and earlier years. And then one day, our professor walks, not professor, like the school teacher, walks in and says that there's this program called Injaz, which is basically, it's like a company. They call it a company program, where high school basically students get to start their own company. It's not a real company. You start basically, it's between real and virtual, so it's not fully like virtual, it's not fully like real. So you basically, they give you some rules. You have to like raise, real money, but you're capped at very little money. You have to create a real product. uh, the classmates, your classmates, you get to elect like who will be the different roles within the companies. You become like, your class turns into like a company with like employees and different people who call the shots and plan and do the work and whatever. So we started that program, and it was a competition, so it runs for 3 months. And during that time, I was like completely into it. I forgot that I was even in school. At some point, I would not even bring my like textbooks to school. I just had that like company program like textbook and my laptop, and you know didn't care about anything else. So that told me something at that time. I mean, maybe like looking back at it, at the time, I was too like dived into it and too excited about it. But cut a story short, we won in Lebanon for the competition, and then got to go to participate in the regional competition in Oman. Um we were high school students. We're in Oman. There's another also side story to that as well, because we like as a team, like not the whole class went, but the team that were like kind of like managers within that company. We got stuck in Oman because there was like a small 7 day like war in Lebanon. So we are like high school students stuck in Oman. But luckily we were a nice hotel, and they were very nice to like keep us there for a few days. Anyway, so that program ended at the end of my high school, and it's kind of like my excitement ended with it. It's like, I thought I was in something that should continue, right? But the program ended, the company ended, and then had to go to university, right? So it's like I was living in this like bubble, and then all of a sudden I realized that it's kind of like over.
Sorry, was that the bumper stickers project?
Yeah, that was
Okay.
like it was called PNBs. The company are doing like bid, so they give you like $800 cap to raise, and with
Mm,
that $800, you have to go and start a product and
mm,
sell it and have customers.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, so when I started university, I kind of was back in square one. So like everyone else, just have to like go. Pick my courses, pick my major, accordingly pick what career path I want to take. And I thought it was going to be consulting, right? Because the utmost success in when you graduate as a university student at that time, maybe partly still today, but startups were not as famous at that time. This was back in 2008 when I started college. So the path was, yeah, you go into consulting. If you do that, that's a great career. That's success. So I attended every single presentation by the big strategy consulting firms. Used to go to all of them, but I was struggling with like my grades were never. I was never like a '90s kind of like student, so uh, I was never a school person. Even at university, what I enjoyed more where the university life, and maybe the I was more active in like the clubs and these things rather than the classes. And some classes I would do well, others I wouldn't do so well. But for consulting, for you to get into the big firms, you have to be like in the like your grades not 80. I was like 80. You have to be like in the 90s, which I wasn't, which is why I got rejected from every like internship I tried to apply to at that time with like McKinsey or Booz or whatever. So I ended up going to internship with a less, another consulting firm that was fine with my 80 grade, but they interviewed me and they liked me. So I did two internships there when I was in university. I did the first one in my first year in Beirut, and the second one I did it in Dubai. So I came to Dubai And then that's when I did my second internship here. So throughout this internship is when this kind of like moment was. So what was weird to me is that yeah, this was my second internship in consulting. I was trying to make the best out of it, like try to learn as much as possible, and I did learn a lot at that time. So I was working like crazy hours just intentionally because I wanted to like learn and get the most out of it. I felt like I was given access to like something that has a lot of information, and I wanted to get that to make the most out of that access. But then at the same time, you get these a lot of the full time consultants that are there, especially the younger ones who are close to my age at that time, but were already like not interns but like full time staff. They hated their lives. A lot of them hated their like they wanted to leave. So everyone in university wanted to get into consulting, and that's where I was most of the time. And then when I got into, the consulting firm, a lot of people there wanted to get out. So there was something weird about why do people want to get in and others want to get out. So there was I got to talk to a lot of them and whatnot. So I wasn't really sure if that's I kind of felt at some point that maybe I'm thinking this is the right path but it's not. So one particular day I was doing a lot of reading, also listening to a lot of not podcasts at that time. I think it was more like videos on YouTube, reading different books and so on. And I came into the office at like 8:30 in the morning. There wasn't like many people there, so I used to carry like a notebook and write every day like my kind of like five that's what like five goals for the day, and also write like some like kind of like thoughts as well. So when I was writing that, I kind of like was sitting there and I imagine myself when I'm 60 years old, like when I'm 60, because I was doing a lot of thinking throughout that period about what I want to do and whatnot. So I kind of fast forwarded to like when I'm 60 or 65 or whatever, and used to always think that okay, I want to be like, being a CEO or being a company or entrepreneur or whatever is that's the answer. But that's what I used to think before that day, right? But that was not enough for me to kind of like feel that I can get into it and just forget about everything else. So when I forwarded to that time and imagine myself when I'm 60, being a CEO, being an entrepreneur, being whatever it is, was not what was going to make, even having a lot of money was not what was going to make me happy when I imagined myself at that time. What I thought what was going to make me happy at that time, like when I'm looking back, is have lived an interesting story. So that was basically the answer for me. So it was like having lived an interesting story is basically what it is. And the nice part about, or the interesting part about, the what drove me, because at that time, you're in you're in university, everyone is doing the normal thing, so doing something that no one else is doing is there's a lot of pressure, so you need something to keep you going. So having lived an interesting story as kind of like a direction helped me in many ways, that during that time, whenever something bad happens, I would say, oh, the story just got a lot more interesting. Whenever good things happen, you're like, the good things are happening, so you're
Like
not
COVID, right?
yeah, whatever it is, when you're trying to like start a business, or a lot of things are going to go wrong, and at that time there was no one to give you that reassurance. So this objective for me was the reassurance, because because part of it was like double edged, so if things go bad, it's just made the story a lot more interesting, that I'm gonna tell when I'm like 60 or 65. So yeah, so that made me, so that was like the answer for me. And after that day specifically, I decided that I'm not gonna look for any job in my last year of college. So I did not apply for any, I didn't even update my resume. In my last year of college, I didn't even look at my resume. Now that, that can look okay, normal, but at that time when everyone, literally everyone around you, friends, everyone in university, all they're doing is update their resume every day, apply for jobs, looking for opportunities, and I'm there not doing any of that. So that had a lot of pressure, of course. but what I did is that I went back to university and actually started Step in university in my last year, and it was called something else at that time. It's called Start, and it was basically doing workshops in art galleries. So get art galleries and do workshops related to tech as well in one way or the other. And tech wasn't famous at that time, like I said.
Before you get into step, I just wanted to cover one more aspect. Was you're talking about um, going through life trying to build an interesting story, but you've also tried to inspire other founders by creating this vision for an Arab dream, which is something you talk about in a lot of interviews as well. What is the Arab dream? I'm guessing it's analogous with the American dream. And what does it look like? And how do people start dreaming along with you?
Yeah. Right now, I start thinking about it more like a Dubai dream rather than an Arab dream. I'm
Yeah.
not sure if there's an Arab dream anymore.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, it is a little bit like the American dream in one way. I think Dubai specifically is a is the right place for that. Not that there isn't other places. Ideally, there would be, and the Arab world has a lot of potential. You know, whether it's in Lebanon or in other places that gives you the opportunity, but right now it doesn't. So in most places, I would say, at least in my opinion, you don't really get that opportunity to build the that Arab dream, right? I think Dubai is the only exception, and that's why you see a lot of people, like myself and many, not only Arabs but Indians or people from other countries neighboring, Dubai that come here in pursuit of that dream, in one way or the other. So, and that's what I came here for as well. I came for like a pursuit of the Arab dream, and Dubai is the land of opportunity. Gives you the opportunity to actually go after what you want and work hard and not have to worry about things that shouldn't be things that you get to worry about every day, like we do in Lebanon, like electricity or having good internet or being safe or not. Here you get to do that, and you get to focus on and it exposes you to many things as well. So that's part of it as well. So you get a lot of exposure to the world, the different people and cultures that you get to meet here in the city. um so yeah, I mean, that's big part of it. But as you know, the region and the Arab world has a lot of people that are a lot of young people. So we're mostly made of young people who are between the age of like 18 and 30 years old. I'm like now on the upper end of that. But a lot of these people, want to pursue their dreams, and they've got the potential to do that. But unfortunately, the space that we're in hasn't helped today, with the exception of Dubai and some other exceptions here and there. And that's big part of that is also you can pursue dreams in many things, in culture and art and science and business and tech, and I decided to focus on the tech and business side of it. um, but even, I mean, even with step feed and Yalla feed, many which are media platforms, we got to part of the objective was kind of like contributing to building the modern Arab world, because I would like to see the Arab world. I think some of the Arab world is on the path to that, but I hope that one day the whole Arab world will become a more modern Arab world. Now, some people might confuse that with westernized Arab world. Part of it is true, yes, because as you go more west, the more definition of modern is. But it's not necessarily that. I think it's just having uh, in terms of being able to pursue opportunities, in terms of uh, also being well exposed, being exposed to other cultures, and many other things that can contribute to this modern Arab world as well. And that's Dubai. That's what Dubai does. I mean, Dubai is the most of modern cities in the region.
Dubai is a good place to start dreaming. So
Yeah, for sure.
you've touched upon a lot of interesting points that I want to explore. But before that, what I want to do is to set the context. I want to play a little game segment with you. And yeah, in this, I'm going to
You're ahead of me in the Lego. I'm behind.
not a
Need
race
to
at all.
catch up. Yeah.
So in this segment, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to list out some really stupid startup ideas that I came up with last night that are specific to this region, and then you can let me know what do you think of them, whether they can work, what extent they can work, and you can give me a rating out of 10. Okay. So my first idea is this kind of solar cell photovoltaic cell that you can attach to the back of your car that creates energy every time someone flashes you on the road.
That every
It
time
is
someone, okay. That's an
Creating-
amazing idea.
Yeah,
I would buy that. Yeah.
yeah. And then drive slow on Emirates Road.
Do it on purpose. Like
Yeah.
you're driving as slow as possible.
Yeah, create
As
energy.
long as they don't bump into you. And then
Yeah, perfect.
well, I would say that for solving a
Yeah.
problem, I would rate this high, but would it work or not? Probably not. So I'm gonna go with like 4/10. But I think it solves a problem. So
I work with
you
four. Don't
started
worry.
with a problem. Yeah.
That's better than the rating I got from my friends. Okay. The next idea is the small pocket printer that you can carry around with you that will take in all those massage parlor cards that people leave on your car. It will take those in and print out your own business card.
Take those, recycle them, and print out
your
your
own
own.
business card.
Yeah, I've gotten a lot of these. I have a photo of
Yeah.
like my car with
Just lined up.
with all these cards. Again, you're solving problems, but which is a good place to start.
Yeah.
Starting with problems. I'm gonna give this a 2.
Okay. I'm going further down. Okay, and the last one is probably not just an app. Maybe it could be a patch to Google Maps or Waze where it starts playing like really soothing classical music every time you miss an exit on Emirates Road.
So Google Maps that.
Basically just a navigation app, but it will
Okay.
always play like soothing music. Don't worry, you missed your exit. Like, then it's like, oh, I missed the exit. Just starts playing Beethoven or something.
Oh no, that's not gonna solve it. I'm still gonna be pissed off for sure for missing an exit. You
So-
keep getting lower. This is 1.
I think we were off to a good start. So we'll stick to the first idea for sure.
Yeah, I think the first one I like that because I get really annoyed from that.
All right, so let's continue with the idea that got the most points, which is my photovoltaic cell that will convert energy and someone flashes. So now what I want to do is I want to indulge you in a thought experiment. Let's assume that I'm going to start a company in Dubai, and it could be with this idea or maybe a different idea. And I want to get you on board as my mentor. So I'm just going to check with you a lot of elements that go into starting a company, and you can let me know practices that have worked for you, your thoughts on how I should approach it, and we'll take it from there. Sounds good? Okay. Before we start, I came across an interesting thought by Peter Thiel. He said that, so in Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy, there's a very famous opening line where he says that all happy families are the same, but all unhappy families are unhappy in their own way. And what Peter Thiel says is that this is the opposite in business. He says all happy companies are happy in their own way because they've created a very unique product offering and value. But all unhappy companies are the same because they make the same mistakes. So is this something you agree with?
I tend to agree with a lot of things that Peter Thiel says. So. Not sure I need to think about it, but no, I haven't heard that actually him say that before. I'm not sure if all companies are happy in the same way, though.
No,
He
what
said
it's the opposite.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. So they're not happy. They're happy in different ways
because they all have a unique offering.
Yeah. Okay, got you. Partly true. Yeah, I'd say it's true.
So just keeping that in mind, then what I want to start now with is okay. We've got the amazing 4/10 idea for the photovoltaic cell, but let's just keep that aside. Let's say I want to start a company and I don't have an idea. So that's the first spot you will start with. And there are two schools of thought when you're coming up with an idea to start a company. The first school of thought is something that Peter Thiel espouses as well in 0 to 1 and Clayton Christensen in Innovator's Dilemma, where they argue that it's much better for you to start a new market. So in Peter Thiel's world, you go from 0 to 1, you create a market where none existed, and you end up establishing a monopoly in that market. So you get the prime mover advantage and you have a monopoly over it. And that's a long term solution. And that will give you much better gains down the line. It'll be much harder initially, but that is the effort to take. And the other school of thought is that the first option is very risky, very hard to do. You can't just create a new market. Often you think you're creating a market where none exists or people are not interested, or the value you think that you're trying to create doesn't exist. And it's much easier to not reinvent the wheel, but take an existing market where you know the rules are established and you know the game theory of it, and you just, instead of going from 0 to 1, you go from 1 to 1.5. You make an incremental change in what already exists. And notoriously, Google wasn't the first search engine, Facebook wasn't the first social network, Amazon wasn't the first online marketplace. So where do you stand on this? What do you think is a better school of thought when you're coming up with an idea for a company?
Well, I don't think it's like strict, and that applies to like everywhere around the world in that same way for that concept. I think what Peter Thiel was focusing on within the book is more one. It's more geared towards very developed markets like the U.S. And the second thing is that he was focusing on groundbreaking companies that in the right market at the right time. How if they want to have a massive impact and scale at different levels, that's why you'd need to kind of like follow in terms of school of thought. But that does not apply to, if I start a company today, is it going to succeed or not? One, not everyone wants to start a company or startup that necessarily scales from nothing to billions of dollars. And there are a lot of successful companies that have an audience and have a very good product and very good teams, and are profitable, and are not massive companies that ate up a huge market or whatever. There's a lot of niche companies that solve a very like kind of specific problem in a specific industry, and build good customers. But if you want to build what he refers to is, yeah, like the top 10%, or the if you want to build companies that end up being very large companies and very successful companies, then you need to follow that kind of like school of thought where you go into a space and you take it from 0 to 1, and you end up monopolizing that space. And what are the ingredients or the things you need to follow in order to get there, such as a lot of the big famous companies that we know about. That does not apply whatsoever to starting a company in the Middle East at all. So because we're not in a developed market, a lot of this is very likely to fail. You can take some kind of like parts of these ingredients or recipes, and try to adapt them to here. But here is the opposite way of things, because you can look at who actually took a market from 0 to 1, like for example Uber in the US, and then you try to kind of, and these are the startups that work best here. Is this always going to be the case forever? It shouldn't be, and I hope not. But right now, most companies that are built out of the region are built to service this region. They're not built to service a global market. So you rarely see companies, and I don't like that much. I would rather see like more, especially now that the ecosystem is more developed, to start seeing more companies coming out of, let's say, Dubai, that are actually competing globally and have customers globally, not just in the Middle East or the surrounding regions. But currently, this is not the case. And the other alternative works for the region. So it works to take a concept that worked somewhere else, and implement it here and localize it in a certain way. So to summarize it, it's there's a few things to keep in mind. One is, what region are you in? Are you in the U.S. or another market like the Middle East, or Europe, or India, or Asia, or whatever? Um, like China now is a market where you can start something, and you can follow the 0 to 1 as well, kind of approach. That's the first question. The second question: Are you trying to build, or are you wanting to build something that solves a very big problem, and can end up being eating up a huge market or a huge space and becoming a monopoly in it. The notion that everyone wants that, I don't know. Maybe definitely not everyone. Very few are built for that, and it takes a lot to actually like get to that. Um, and I don't think everyone wants it either. So I think there's a lot of people that are happy with building a successful company that focuses on a specific smaller problem, and could be a tech startup as well. Not every tech startup has to solve a big problem and take over a big. Even in the U.S., you have a lot of startups that are solving uh, smaller problems, coming in to solve things that, and there's tools every day that are coming out to do things like that. So something to make your video recording better, something to make your podcast recording better, something to uh, improve Excel sheets, for example, or hundreds of products that are coming out every day that are very useful and very good and solve like the problems in specific markets, or problems that consumers face regularly.
Just to explore monopolies a bit further, do you think founders often make a mistake of identifying a false monopoly? So, for example, I might start the first restaurant in Dubai that only serves British food. And I think I've established a monopoly over that market of people who just like British food. But the mistake I might have made is that my competition is not restaurants that serve British food, because there are none of those, but all restaurants in Dubai. And my market is people who just go to restaurants in general. So while I think that I've got a niche over there, it doesn't exist at all. And people don't view it that way. They are just people who would like to go to restaurants. So in that sense, I expect a product to really shoot off because I'm the first of its kind. But in fact, I'm in a very competitive market. Do you think people make those kind of mistakes?
I mean, you can define it in different ways. So you can be a leader in a segment and take a big cut out of that market, as small as the example you gave, which is
Yeah.
having a British restaurant in a specific city. Not even around the world, but generally, I mean, monopolies are more better explained, the sense that you're taking over a big market once, like you're monopolizing a big market that a lot of people use, and a big market in the sense of the segment that you're in. So this could be advertising or search or automotive or telco, for example, or and then you kind of take over a specific geographical market or an economic market, like a region or a country or the world as well, right? So the most obvious monopolies are ones that have taken over, especially in tech, but they haven't even taken over the whole world yet,
Yeah.
right? But they're working towards that as well, like Amazon, for example. um
Okay. So moving back to the idea, you mentioned this as well. It's identifying a specific idea that has adds value within a certain segment. This was It was a test that was put forward by Simon Sinek, and he what he challenged founders to think and reflect is that, would you still be attached to your idea or your company if your name wasn't attached to it? So if you were not the CEO or the founder, and you were not to gain money from it or power or fame from it, would you still promote that idea? Do you think this is an important test that founders need to go through of a moment of self reflection?
it's good to think of that to see if you really believe in the problem you're trying to solve or not. But definitely you're attached. I mean, it's a human nature that we're going to be attached to something that we're involved in. And you cannot completely take the two, disconnect the two from each other. But it's really about finding a problem that you're excited about solving, and many times these problems are things that you might have experienced yourself. But it's not always the case. There's also like kind of like a differentiation between synthetic startups and non-synthetic startups. So synthetic is basically when you would basically you just want to start a company and you sit and think through ideas and ideas and ideas, and then you find an idea that you think will work, and then you go and do it. But the whole purpose was because you wanted to start a company. Now, most often, now doesn't mean that these companies were not succeed. There's a lot of them that have succeeded, and it could still succeed. But a better way around it is to actually start from a problem. So you experience a problem that you feel is a really problem that others are facing as well, and you're excited about solving that problem.
That's a
And you go,
non-synthetic startup.
yeah, it's a
That's a,
non-synthetic. Yeah, so you actually have a real problem that you've experienced, and then you're excited about solving, and you go and start a company because you experienced that problem before even thinking about starting a company. Yeah, there are different. I mean, sometimes we all experience problems every day, so not every problem you experience is something that you want to go and start a company for. I certainly think of like a lot of. I have like 2, 3 ideas already, on top of my head from of things, bad things or bad problems that are, things that I struggle with on a day to day basis that I would like someone or me to solve or whatever. So I think about these and I think about the what could be the solution to solve them. But that's not enough as well. Not then you need to see if others are facing this problem as well. Is it a problem that is solvable? And people would pay for it, and how can you deliver the product in order? For example, one of the problems that I face regularly as just a normal person, and I would like to have a service. And I think I found one company that does that, but I think they struggled also to get things up and running. Is basically having like an assistant to go after all your bad experiences at a restaurant, something that happened with the bank, so both in the sense of like what do you call them, like complaints and refunds and like all these different things, because usually personally I hate doing even like points and things like that, right? Personally I really don't like to do a lot of these things, so most of the time I end up saying like whatever, I'm just not gonna bother. I'll lose the 100 dirhams or whatever it is. So I never end up doing it. But there is a loss. There was something that I lost there. So that's something I would like, if there was a service that I can subscribe to, and they basically take over all, like they have access to all my accounts, and they can represent me in, airlines, banks, whatever, and can go and chase my, refunds and complaints and whatever, take a cut out of it, or I just pay a fee and I get this, I would subscribe to it. So the company that I saw that did that, they started around this idea. It's in the US. I didn't think that I actually researched if any of these companies exist, and I didn't find one. But then I came across one of the podcasts that I listened to. So they tried to do this, and then again, it didn't work very well. It was more difficult to implement because it's not easy to like do a lot of these things. But what they ended up focusing on, and they're doing super well in that area, is they focus on only one thing, which is basically airline claims. And there's in the US there's a rule that if your plane is delayed by like even a minute or 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever, or anything, like there's a lot of like different things, changes that actually happen often and people like don't even notice or bother for. Like if your plane is delayed 10 minutes, whatever, you're still gonna take that plane and you're never gonna file a complaint. They do that for you and you get like a refund of like 30%. So imagine how many people around the world, and their value proposition is pretty good. They're like, just give us the permit and we'll get back. Out of every 5 flights you take, there's probably like 2 or 3 flights that you're gonna make money on, and they're taking that out of the airlines. It's a legal clause. So yeah, but that's like one example of something
it's
that,
a pretty
yeah.
interesting idea. But just to bring it back to detaching from the founder and the idea, as a continuation of that is Simon Sinek. He has posted a school bus test, which says that if the founder of the company is hit by a school bus tomorrow and dies, would the company still survive? And arguably, you can say Apple clearly is a very different company when Steve Jobs was in power and now isn't. And we've seen on two different instances that has happened because he was removed initially as well. Microsoft, after Bill Gates left, Steve Ballmer, there was a clear decline, and now it's trying to recuperate again. The same argument can be made for SpaceX, Tesla with Elon Musk, Amazon with Jeff Bezos. So what he argues is, and my gut instinct is, they will not be the same companies without, let's say, SpaceX might not be the
There would
same.
be very different companies,
Very
that's
different.
for sure. Yeah.
So then the argument is that you're not really running a company. What you're running is the force of personality, because it doesn't transcend the personality, you know?
Yeah, I don't think that's fully true, and also I don't think it's fair to generalize with these very big examples, such as Microsoft or Apple, whatever, to every companies around the world. They're very different. So a CEO of Apple or of Microsoft does a very different kind of job for a company that's 1,000 people. The 1,000 people company CEO does a very different job than the company that has 100 people, and then the 100 people CEO company does a very different job than a company that has 10 people. So they need different things at different times. Usually, the companies that are like the examples that you gave, like Elon right now, or Steve Jobs at the time, the two biggest things that they drive is one, it's a vision that drives the entire company, as well as externally, customers and talent, right? So their vision and their kind of like personality and profile drives that in one way or the other. The second thing is a way of doing things generally across the organization as a philosophy that really kind of like impacts their strategy and so on. So these are the two things that are in very large companies you could look for if the founder or CEO leaves, and but it certainly becomes a different company when they leave and someone else comes in. Now, if you look at a company, a small company like a 50 people company or startup, it's different because it's likely that the CEO is not just sitting there sharing a vision and driving things externally and all of that, but is actually like doing work themselves. So they're still heavily involved in a lot of like things that are hands on. So in that case, it's also really different. So you're right that a company is different when the founder or CEO leaves, and that's obvious. In any transition of kind of when you have someone leading something, it's gonna change, like Trump and Biden now, or whatever example. So when you transition into a new kind of someone who's leading, then it's gonna look different. It has to look different, and the person who's taking on should do things differently than or should kind of like put in their own personality and character into it. But again, they're really different, and also some companies, they're CEOs or founders who are usually entrepreneurs, like the examples that you gave, like Bill Gates or Elon or Steve Jobs or these guys. They're It's more like because they're entrepreneurs, so they're driving like a certain groundbreaking kind of like vision that requires a lot of that. But most companies around the world are not like that. So if you look at all the S&P 5, a lot of the S&P 500 companies, or other big organizations, especially like classical ones like airlines or big chains or whatever, they're not. Their CEO is there to. It's a character and a profile and someone who's good at business and good at protecting shareholders' interests and running an operation, and often comes from an industry background. That's what a CEO is. It's not necessarily, of course, in some cases, you need that vision and whatever, but in many cases, it's really about the more quiet CEOs or the ones that run. So in these cases, the company is less impacted necessarily by that kind of it. But every company needs innovation. So whoever is there, they need to be innovating. They need to be uh, coming up with new things and a new way of doing things. So yeah, it does look different, but it's what I would say is that if a small or a large company, if a new person comes in, then they should, regardless of the size, they should run it in their own way, stick to the values and to kind of like that direction or the vision, the initial vision, but then build on that by creating their own vision. And that's one of the things that Steve Jobs told Tim Cook in the letter, I think, that he had sent. I read at that time, 2010 or 11, before he died, is that first thing he told him, don't try to be me. and he succeeded because he didn't try to be him. And actually, if you see that Apple's stock, or in terms like gains, had the most gains since Steve Jobs died. So which is when but he did what he did very successfully is that he did not try to be Steve Jobs. He was himself and used his own skills to the best potential, and that's why the company is still successful, regardless of all the noise that was around, and and consistently every day, every time there's a release, like an Apple product release, everyone like on Twitter and everyone is bashing, no innovation, the company is dead, whatever. Straight the next day they go and buy the product. This same person who was like bad, they go and buy the same product. And
Feeling attacked. Yeah,
yeah.
I do it as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have the idea, or an idea of how to go about coming up with the idea for the company. So let's move on to the next stage. You have already covered the unique aspects of starting a company in Dubai when you were talking about the Dubai dream or the Arab dream. So I'm going to start my company here, and I have all the benefits you've mentioned. But are there any specific techniques that work much better in this region for selling, particularly in Dubai or in the Middle East, that might not work as well in other places as well? For the longest time, one of the notions has been that to sell well in Dubai, you need to have a good network or have that wasta, and that's the only way to really start a good company. Do you think that exists, or there are some ways that work, or it's just whatever works in the world will work here as well?
It's certainly different in every market. I don't think that applies to if you're starting a tech company or a startup. I mean, you need to navigate like in most places. The different things that are there. Some of the challenges here might be different than other places. So, in terms of infrastructure, regulation, different things that you need to overcome. But yeah, if you start a good product, then you have a lot of the there is the right infrastructure and market to do things, but you have to pick a product that works right now in this market, and for this region. But one of the great things that you have here, especially when it comes, and I talk more about like from a tech and startups perspective, is that you have a very good early adopters market in Dubai right now. So if you want to start something, if you start an app, if you start anything that's tech related, you have a good enough market of early adopters who are have good purchasing power. They're well rounded in terms of they've used a lot of technologies and a lot of other apps to test your product to see if it works or not. And that's why a lot of the startups are coming out from here the most, and the region come out from here, because you do have that in place. So you can get up and running quickly. You have a market to start with. Now the challenge is that the market is not big enough. So when if things go well, then you need to expand into a different place. You need to go to usually people go to Saudi Arabia and they expand there on Egypt product. But it is the right market in the region to get started, I would say.
Also want to focus on growth and sales. So this is something you mentioned when we were talking about the first step mini conference you did start, and the story is that you called up all your friends personally to invite them there, and you've spoken about that was the only way to do it, and that was a lot of hard work. And then you've also spoken publicly about not generating any profits for the first 2 or 3 years. It's always the case with most companies. So when you're at that stage, when the initial rush or the honeymoon period with the idea is gone, and you are now facing the challenge of you're in the transitional period where you want to really grow further, and you know the kind of hard work that's involved, the difficulties that lie ahead for you, how do you motivate yourself at that point? Because there will come a point where you'll go through your first failure, the second failure, and you just the enormity of your challenge ahead of you hits you. At that point, when you're at that period of transition, how do you keep yourself motivated?
Yeah, I mean that time also was a bit different. That was 10 years ago, so it was a bit different than now. Now there's a lot more ways, more creative ways, but you always have to be creative, and it is challenging at the beginning because no one wants to talk to you. No one, as a as a person you're a nobody unless you know, and having a very good product is also challenging because you need, you know, resources and effort to build that. So it's a combo of having something good that solves a problem and, you know, being kind of like persistent as a person and, you know, utilizing your own network, yeah, your friends, your family, your people who are close to you, who would like to see you succeed and would like to support you in most cases. So but it's also about asking, you know, reaching out and asking for help. um but I mean, like I said, so every day, you know, with startups, something that I've experienced like regularly is that one days you'd feel like amazing, like you're killing it, you know, things are going amazing, and another day you'd feel like shit. You'd feel like, you know, this is not gonna work, it's gonna fail, all this effort, all this time, you know, it's gonna go to waste. uh so you really experience, and sometimes can be like yesterday I felt great and today I feel like shit, and then tomorrow it can be this close. It's not even just like phases, it's like it can be, you know, a day difference. So this is normal, and I think probably most startups, if not all of them, and founders experience that. So you just kind of have to keep going and see the hope in the days when things are going well and when things are challenging. And many times, you know, challenges, and I know that's like a bit cliche to say, but when you're really struggling with something and um, you know, you can basically, it can help you get more creative to find solutions, because it forces you, kind of like the situation puts you in a corner where you have to find solutions and get creative. So I mean, it's not always the case that if you have a challenge that you're going to end up with, you know, solving some problem, or sometimes it is what it is, right? It's just basically you have a problem and it sucks, and you know, that's where it ends. You know, you end up, you know, and end up with the problem basically.
So just to wrap up this segment on sales and growth, also, do you want to add anything? If is this something unique to securing funding in this region? Is there anything specific that works better here, or it's all the same, like you mentioned with the previous answer? It all depends, and
Yeah, I mean, you have different choices, right?
Mhm.
So when starting up, and I don't think there's one that works better than the other. They're just different paths that people you just have to be comfortable with the path that you take. So I mean, you're gonna go back to like from like the beginning, right? If someone wants to start something, there's an option of, I have a job, let's say, and I can start working on something on the side until it gets up and running, and then once it does, I can move to that full time and become a full time entrepreneur. And I used to say at some points that, you know, you cannot be a part time entrepreneur, but maybe I've changed my mind a little bit on that. I think you can be you cannot be, like, my opinion now, you cannot be like a part time entrepreneur for very long. So you have to be you know, at some point you're gonna have to like fully focus on that, and that's probably before you get, so you can be part time before you get funding, and then once you have a product and customers, and that's when, you know, it's time to leave your job and focus fully on this. So that's one path. Another path is, which I've taken initially, is the you know, having a business that has a side that produces income, and usually their services. So that's kind of what happened with Step and Spider Frogs. So Spider Frogs was you know, the company that, you know, selling services, so producing short-term income, and then using some of that income and profit to invest in Step. So that's why I could afford going through, you know, 2 years without any income from Step, for example, because there was another income that's making me personally, you know, income to live, and, you know, to be able to pay for the expenses of the business and to invest into what Step became. Um, a third path is also, you know, just kind of like having some savings, leaving. You might have a job that you leave, or not have had a job, and bootstrap, basically bootstrap, and either bootstrap yourself if you have some of your own savings, or try to keep it at a minimal and get creative with tools that you could use to get a prototype. Like now there's a lot of, you know, no code tools as well, so you can have a MVP or product ready without even needing, if you're not a technical founder. Yeah, these are the different paths that you could take. There's also the path of, like, if you're a student, you can, yeah, that's the best path. That's also partly the path I've taken as well initially, is that I mean, as hard it is very hard, and you tend to do a lot of mistakes because you don't know, there's a lot of things that you don't know, but that's not enough to, like, stop you from doing something.
Is
So
there something specific in UAE that can help you? Like any technique you can take for getting funding that might help in this region specifically?
it's not necessarily about I think you know so as a student, when you're a student, if you go and start a company, it's the opportunity cost for you, because the actual, like, the and it's always the opportunity cost, but as a student, the opportunity cost is mainly the career, because you're not making a lot of money anyways. So as a student, you're coming off from, living with the minimum required, so to go from that to continue to living on the minimum required is fine, but it becomes challenging when you have a job that pays you really good money to give up that job, and then go and start your business, which is gonna be added cost on you. And most of the time, you're not gonna be able to pay yourself from that business, especially if it's a tech startup for some time. So yeah, because there might be other costs that you need to cover other than your own costs.
Sure. Okay, so let's move on to the next part then. I've got my idea, got a certain idea of how to establish it, how to grow further from there. The next is building my team and the corporate structure. So one inherent problem that I've seen with the corporate structure is that in the military we give medals to people who sacrifice themselves so that others may gain. But in businesses, we give bonuses to managers who sacrifice others so that they may gain. This is a very common proverb that goes around.
Yes,
Unfortunately,
good analogy.
yeah, unfortunately, most companies are structured this way. Why do you think it happens? Do you think it's a natural evolution of when you start scaling upwards, or there is a way to avoid this?
Um, it depends on the nature of the business. I mean, there's at the beginning, when you're starting, it's a bit, all over the place, and everyone wears many hats, and doing different things. Yes, as things start growing, I mean, hierarchy and structure has been, also kind of like criticized in different ways, but there hasn't been any alternative. So there's even been, some there's like Tony Shea of Zappos. I don't know if you know about him. He tried to kind of, like, his whole theory about, you know getting rid of, like, hierarchy structure and turning everything to be, like, flat within the organization. It didn't work. He tried to do it in a relatively big organization. So that was now acquired by Amazon as well. It did work, but it had its own problems as well. So I had, like, more problems than the hierarchy. So the corporate structures that are there do work in different ways, but yeah, there's different ways how you can create these, and how, and it really depends on the company culture in one way or the other. So how detached, people who are in higher kind of, like, roles from the rest of the team. um Also, just, how much trust you build within your team for your team members to go and do, but that gets harder as you grow as well. So it's not very easy to build a relatively large organization, especially ones that grow really fast, like startups. When you're hiring, bringing in people every day, and there's new hires all the time. If you are a startup that grew really fast, while dealing with all the other challenges, to be able to maintain, like, a great culture and so on. And cultures are often confused with, how happy people are in general, and how, the benefits and what you get within the company and so on. But it's not really that. I mean, the company cultures are usually, they're defined by, a common vision, a common kind of, like, objective and way of doing things. uh that's what defines, like, a company culture, more than any. And being it's sometimes, people compare them to tribes, but they are a little bit like tribes. So within a tribe, even if you're struggling and unhappy within the tribe, you still feel that you have your sense of belonging and common vision within that tribe. That's what's more important about a company culture than not that the other stuff are not important, but they're different things. They're not what defines a company culture. They're benefits, how well you treat your staff, how happy in general the team is, and
Can we explore that for a moment? Because um, the association with the tribe or the mob mentality, there's a major issue with that, and that is individuals, we will go towards freedom or we will go towards truth, right? But a mob will always move towards consensus, which has largely been the issue with politics as well. And then you see that reflecting in larger companies. And because the psychology exists, you find that big companies, as they scale upwards, they become less dynamic, less flexible, very hard to make changes or admit their mistakes because there's a lot at stake. And it's just easier to continue down the path you are and try and focus on short-term goals.
yeah.
So how do you think a company can avoid that?
They're not completely disconnected, so they are intertwined in one way or the other. But the point I was trying to make is that you need to have like what the definition of a company culture is and that starts sometimes from very early on, from kind of like what what you do early on within the company, and sometimes it's unintentional, sometimes it is many times it's unintentional. It just happens that the company becomes that kind of like aggressive company that chases things, or becomes more like, and it does reflect a lot of times also personality of the founders, uh, and what happens within. But yeah, so I'm not saying they're completely unrelated, but they often get confused between what defines. Like you could have a company that has great employee benefits. People uh, feel that, let's say, they're heard and whatever, and all of these things, and but at the same time there isn't a common culture or a goal. So a great company is one that has that kind of culture I'm defining, and at the same time has a very dynamic kind of way of doing things, has empathy, and has a good environment or atmosphere for people to collaborate and work together. So this is ideally what you want to get to, uh, but they're often confused. They're two different things.
You've touched upon the founder's role in this and being a good leader. One of the biggest issues that leaders face is that it's hard to align your employees with your passion and your priorities. Because it's your company, you have a personal stake in it. It's your idea, it's your baby, you want to see it grow. And you also have monetary gains to be made. If the company grows, you become very rich. But for employees, sure, they may be passionate about the idea, they may believe in the idea, but for them, there's a slight difference in the priority naturally because they don't have a stake in it. So sure, they like the idea, they want to see it grow, but at the end of the day, it's maybe a job that's paying their rent, paying their bills, or supporting their family. And while they love to see the company succeed, if it doesn't succeed, they'll just move on to another company. Employees always have that option. So how do you overcome that challenge, and how do you get the right team and align them with your priorities and your passion?
Well, there are two sides to this, and one of them, which is unfortunately and still not very common and not very popular in the region, is actually to have employees have a stake in the company and have equity and have you know can benefit from the upside as well. So if the company sells or whatever, and there are multiple reasons why that is not as common here. The biggest of them being that there hasn't been many cases where not where staff were not given equity, but where staff made a lot of money from equity, and that was the only like known example for that was Kareem in the region, where the staff did get equity, and converted that into actual a lot of money for a lot of people. So that's the difference between here and other places in Europe or the US, where there's many people that you might know who have actually made good returns as employees and equity. So when you go to your next job interview, you're going to ask for equity because someone that's actually did very well from that equity. And in markets like the US, the equity is sometimes more important than the salary, even for people. Here it's not the case, and I can tell you, I've interviewed a lot of people, and you know very few or almost none have asked for equity, as something that someone would ask or inquire or care about, and I don't blame them. Again, and hopefully there will be more exits in the region where more people have made money from them than you care about asking for that. So that's the first thing, and then the second thing is, for many people, it's the purpose is extremely important in what you're doing. So yes, salary and etc. is important, but also feeling part of something, and it has a purpose, gives people a sense of accomplishment as well. Now the only difference that with a lot of if you're it's different when you're employee than a founder, you're less attached to that purpose. So if things are going great, you're feeling accomplished. So when I was saying, like, on the down days and the up days, like, it's for employees, they don't need to take that pain as much as the founder. So if there was a period of struggle, it depends on the nature of the people, right? And it's also the job of the founders to keep their staff kind of also uh, feel that common objective of going through struggles like COVID, for example, or different things. But I mean, and this is understandable, but often, because for if you're an employee, it's easier to go on to do something else. And sometimes for the founder, if they had that option, they might do it as well. In time of like deep struggle, if they had that option of I can go and do something else, many would do that. But they don't have that option many times because they've invested a lot of time, a lot of their effort, their time. They're also still, of course, like passionate about what they're trying to do. So, and they were in this from the beginning, right? To kind of go through all kinds of struggles as well. But yeah, if you're an employee, I mean, your equity in the company and your belief that purpose matters, but it's easier for you to exit and join another company that can give you a new purpose and new equity and other things. And also, it depends on a lot of other factors, um, which is normal as well.
When I was coming up in the ranks when I was in university, there was a startup boom. And amongst my peers, it was the cool thing to do was to start your own company and become a founder and get the hoodies. And, the whole culture, the zeitgeist was that you need to start your own company. And that is still persisted. Even now, there's a negative label towards a 9 to 5 job or a desk job or working under someone else. It's largely seen as this, people make jokes about it or they look down upon it. Naval Ravikant, he says that to really get rich, you can't be renting out your time. You need to own a piece of equity or a business that makes money while you sleep. So when you're hiring people, especially younger people now who come with that mindset, is there something you need to keep in mind to get them aligned with your vision as well?
You mean in terms of like the difference between having like getting a job, like
Yeah, getting a job, and because they all know that they want to start their own brand.
not everyone wants that, and
Mm.
and not everyone has to. I mean, starting your own, and it's not for everyone as well. So okay, the thing is that you can still kind of like be happy, build a career, accomplish a lot of things, uh, just by joining in someone else's purpose and kind of like goal and idea and try to make that happen. Even in I don't like, I would never do it, like have like a corporate career, work at a big corporate and build a career from that. But again, some people like that, some people enjoy that, and they do achieve things within doing that as well. Like, I think it's um, you cannot say that working at a corporate job, even if it's 9 to 5, you're not adding value to it. Like, everyone is adding value in different ways. And talking about Dubai, we're talking Dubai is one of the best places to build a corporate career as well. Like, you can grow in within your career, make very good income. With that, invest in certain things that you might be excited about or interested in, and be happy as well. I mean, it's really, you asked me at the beginning the question of why you're doing that. Many entrepreneurs don't have like necessarily like the clear answer for
The why.
uh, yeah, the why. And I don't think necessarily there needs to be like one answer. It's kind of like very difficult to get to like one answer defines your whole life of why you're going through your life. And it's normal to doubt that many times, because here we're going to get a lot more philosophical, like, okay, why do you exist, and what's the point of all of it, and eventually in 500 years, who cares,
We'll get to those questions. They're
yeah,
coming up.
even if you wear whatever, so yeah, so it depends on each person what they want to do, and each one has, now you have a lot of people who hate what they're, this is where it gets problematic. So if you're stuck in what you do and you hate it and you're complaining every day, then no, that's not good. But if you're happy in your corporate job and you're enjoying it and you're growing, and you know then great. Corporate or working for startup, because another way as well is working for a startup instead of starting your own. Also, your at the end of the day, startups are not going to happen on their own, and it's not the founder or whatever who's made it's you need people and talented people, and a talented team. Like, if every founder needs a lot of talented people around them to get things done, and to drive things. So if all these people went and wanted to be founders, then there'd be no people to hire, who are talented.
Just before we wrap up this segment, I want to just quickly touch upon one more topic with you. If you could just summarize how you separate your personal life and professional life once you become a founder of a company, because naturally it takes up a large chunk of your day. As the company grows further, you have this constant anxiety, stress, and targets in mind, calls, emails going through, and you need to be able to maintain your social life, your relationship with your family as well. So, how do you make that mental switch?
Yeah, personally, I'm not a big believer in a work life kind of balance. I think you have to. So there's two parts to it. One is, whatever way you live your life doesn't have to be exactly the same way for the next 50 years or whatever. So it changes, right? So there might be a year where you're more focused on starting your startup, or another year where things are, you're focused on a hobby, or whatever, or focused on family, for example. So things, so there's not one way. Like, there's a lot of books and people that say, you need to exercise and then wake up at a certain time, you need to work for this many hours, spend time with family for this many hours. Personally, I don't believe in that. There could be days where you're spending more time than what these things tell you with your family, and there could be days that you're not spending any time. So that's one thing. Then another thing is, which is, I forgot who said that, but they said that you have to pick 3 out of 5 things at a time that you're doing like really like with the full focus and giving them your all. And the confusion often with this is also, you can pick at a time, so they can alternate. They don't have to you don't have to pick 3 for the rest of your life. You can alternate as well. And out of these 5 things, it's work, family, exercise, work, family, exercise, sleep, sleep, and there's one more. So we said friends, family, work, sleep, and exercise. Yeah, these are the five of them. So you have to pick 3 out of these that you can do. Like, if you want to do 3 really well, you can only pick 3. You cannot be doing like, might want to, like, this year I'm focusing on work, family, and sleep, for example.
Yeah.
And I can do these really well. Now I could be doing 4 of them, but it means that something is gonna miss out at some point. Uh, if you're giving something, if you're giving one of these things like extreme, time and attention. Let's say work because you just started your company, or exercise because you're in a, you're trying to get to a goal of whatever. You're gonna need to give it more than the usual time.
Okay. And before we start wrapping up, I also want to check with you, how do you deal with failure? Because failure is going to be a part of this journey, no matter what you try to do. No one can be perfect along the way. So, do you have something that's worked for you? Any recommendations for people? Because it is a very crippling effect when it happens when you fail at something.
I don't have an answer for this, to be honest, like a specific recipe or way. Each one deals with it in their own way. Sometimes, where it's normal for us as humans to just be like delusional about that we failed, and just to kind of like keep our confidence and self together.
Are you talking about the U.S. president? I'm
Yeah. And concede. I mean, no one wants to, like, no one wants to fail, right? But it's also about. I think sometimes people end up like reflecting on their failures later on at a later time. But I think it's normal to, at the time when you failed, like for you not to feel that, you want to take that as something that's good that happened. But often, people learn a lot from from failing. And failing sometimes can be, it doesn't have to be, it could be a big thing, like, I don't know, you started a company and the whole thing just flopped, or it could be small failures, right? So you failed, and these are going to be there every day, and these are the things that you learn from the most.
So before we move into our last stage of questions, I want you to quickly interpret what we have built. I
I
feel
haven't
like you
built
were really
anything.
focused on
Yeah.
building something and then
Uh,
you got
I
lost
had
by the
I had
ideas.
started, yeah.
Yeah.
I had started.
So okay, let's see. What do you think this is? Oh, well,
Oh,
clearly now what do you
yeah,
think
now
this
it's
is?
have it.
Now
It
something
it
else.
it looks like a classical, like Roman, maybe because of that over here on the either a cruise ship, like
Yeah,
a yeah, or like a yeah, like a
Roman.
medieval kind of.
Oh, interesting. Halfway through, I thought I was building like a cubic, like office space, but
Ah,
then
okay,
then it
yeah.
became too much, and now it looked like a factory to
Here it
me.
feels like the refinery, like
Yeah, like a
yeah,
factory or
okay,
something. I thought
yeah,
interesting, and these smaller elements. I don't know what you were building here. It started off promising.
yeah. Then it became crippled.
Yeah. Okay, amazing. So let's move into our last stage of questions. What are some people? Well, it's done now. It's too
Yeah, I was
late now.
trying to see where I can build.
What is that? A chair? Throne. Well, it's too late. Next time.
Next time, yeah, I'll come just for this.
Yeah, just for this. Well, you can still be here when the camera's not
Yes,
rolling,
yeah.
just building something. Okay, so what are some people, role models, books, or movies that have been a very strong influence in your life?
Movies, there's many. Shawshank Redemption, I think, is one. Shutter Island is also like the dark, but it's very interesting. Gladiator is probably one as well. There's many movies really that I can go on. Books, there is so I think also there's a lot of books. There's more recent books. There's a brief answers to big questions, Stephen Hawking. I found it very interesting. I love biographies. I've read a lot of biographies, so some of those are Elon Musk biography, Steve Jobs. Also, there's Shoe Dog, also for the Nike founder.
Yeah, Phil Knight.
Yeah, biographies are great. So I've read a lot of different biographies.
If
That
there
I
had to
find
be one
interesting.
book that you think every founder has to read for sure before they start.
Like startup books. I mean, there's
Yeah.
yeah, Zero to One is a very good book, but you have to understand like what things we were talking about, like the perspectives of that. Like cannot take. You have to think where you are, what you're trying to do, like what you want as well. Then see if there's things from that book to apply to yourself. That's definitely a good book. There's a good book that's more practical that I haven't read, but I've read like a summary about and heard the called from a very like not a famous author or anything, called Zero to Sold by a guy called Arvid, and it's more about like bootstrapping, a business and the question. It's more Zero to One, which is obviously Peter Thiel is much more grand, like big picture kind of level. This is actually more like on the day to day. What are the things that you need to do? Steps. I think that's more practical for most founders because Zero to One can end up being very.
Very unorthodox as
nice.
well, right?
Can be very nice to read, and then but it can confuse a lot of people as well in
It's
terms
not
of
a guide. It's more like his thoughts
yeah.
on what practices don't work and why you should do
Yeah,
something
it
else.
could
Yeah,
be a guide to certain companies,
sure.
but not like I think zero to sold is more like guide to most people when I start a company.
Okay. What would you like your legacy to be like?
Yeah, I don't have the answer for that. I mean, it really your legacy gets shaped as things progress in your life. But like we were saying earlier, so in 500 years or even 500 years, legacy doesn't matter anymore, right? Like no one even remembers
Yeah.
who's alive, or even within your family, or even if you were the most successful, famous, globally famous, even if you were that, in many cases, you won't be remembered. So defining legacy is important, but obviously we're all chasing that in one way or the other as well. Like everyone cares about their legacy and what they kind of like leave behind. Um, Not everyone would like do things in their life in pursuit of that, because that's hard to build it. Like because of that, again, even if you build the biggest thing, you might end up being. So imagine if you just build something, but it's also about perspective, that how you look into it. So we are where we are today, and as a humanity, because of all the small things and the big things that our ancestors did before and built. So we wouldn't have a lot of things if it weren't for that. And that was also part of the small contributions of many people. So if you look at it in that way, and that gives you a different perspective and gives you a more sense of purpose towards what you're doing. For me personally, I mean, for the last 10 years, I think one of the things that I like and I'm kind of like proud of is the impact that I've done on the on the Middle East and the region that I'm from, and helping kind of one way or the other shape the startup ecosystem and help founders in a small way. I mean, we were a very small part of a lot of founders' like journey. Obviously, they did it on their own, but on one side, we helped founders to have a platform to talk to others and to fundraise, and also just in terms of the creating momentum and a certain notion in the region here that you can be a founder and entrepreneur and start your own business and be successful at it. So that helps, because then it helps create an ecosystem and different people come into it. And yeah, so that's I think the main thing that kind of like in the last 10 years, from legacy point of view.
Initially, you spoke about um, making sure you live a life that's interesting, or at least is an interesting story. And we've also touched upon leaving behind ideas that live beyond the person. So, do you think then being mortal or your mortality, do you think that plays a very important role in what you're doing today? The fact that you want a legacy, or this, you want the ideas to stay beyond you.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, like as humans, because we know that we're running out of time basically. So that's a big driver for what everyone does every day, right? It's like dogs or cats don't know that. They don't know that they're running out of time. They don't know that they're gonna die. That's only humans know that they're running out of time. So that changes a lot of things for people. But I think it's definitely great that people now get to live longer than before they did. I don't know, 200, 300 or more years ago. Uh, but I think and that's something that Steve Jobs had said in his Stanford speech, that because he also experienced that was when he was first diagnosed with cancer. That like death is the best thing that like one of the best things that happens to humans, because it kind of like clears away the old and brings the new, right? So because as humans, like imagine you have someone who lived in the 1700s still alive today, and you're trying to share ideas with. I mean, even only the people who lived in the last you know kind of like 100 years were struggling to live together on this planet with, and we have differing ideas and different. So imagine being, if people live for like hundreds of years, then someone who's like born, let's say, our age now, has to live with someone who's 200 years old. So someone who's experienced something as far, it's impossible, even if they're still healthy and whatever, just so that's why I think, I do believe in that, mortality is one of the best things, for humans, because it really, because what lives is beyond us. Like what stays and what lives is beyond the person. Everyone likes to think that it's about that, but it's not about, like, I mean, that's a bit of a relieving and depressing thought at the same time, that no one cares about it, as individuals. But at the same time, you know all these individuals is what made the world what it is today. So it's it's all these billions of people that have lived, that made it what it is today, the good and the bad.
Final question. What do you think is the meaning of life?
Wish I had the answer for that. I think it differs for each person, but and it has to be different for each person, because we can't be all doing the same thing. No, it depends if you're asking the meaning of life for
Your meaning. Have you
for a
found yours?
person, or the meaning of like
No, not
life
in
in
general.
general. Yeah.
Just for you. Well, if you have a general
Um,
one as well, we'd love to hear that. But otherwise,
yeah, for me, I don't have a specific one, but I think, being able to play a small part of what all the other humans that are alive now and before have contributed to humanity and the world, while at the same time, I think we go through, I mean, I don't know what happens before and after, but as humans, we go through this period of time that we're alive. You must enjoy what comes with it as well, the things that we were created to kind of like, with, to enjoy the pleasures and to experience the pain of things. Like, you have to go through these things, and you have to kind of like embrace them in one way or the other. But yeah, I mean, for you, I know you're vegan, but for me, but for me, like, going through life without eating a burger, I'm missing out on a lot. So you
Yeah.
can't go through life without eating a really good burger.
simple joys, right?
So, yeah, simple joys as well.
Yeah.
So you have to get to enjoy these things as well. So otherwise, there's no point.
Ray, thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you
on
very
this
much,
episode.
Shalaj.
If
Was
people
great
want
being
to,
here.
yeah, same here. If people want to find you online, or they want to attend your events, where can they find you?
Yeah, so for Step, you can go to stepconference.com. I'm most active personally on Twitter. It's Ray Dargham, my Twitter handle, so you can find me there as well.
Sounds good. Everyone, go and follow Ray. Thank you so much. It was an honor talking to
Thank
you.
you very much, guys. Thank you.